Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen, and today we're going to talk about counterfeit destinies and fake purposes. Counterfeit destinies and fake purposes. It sounds so dramatic, but I love it. There's something about it. What can I say? And this is something that I'm really excited to talk about today. I'm hoping that I can clear some things around this subject and also hopefully put your minds a little bit at ease with certain things that I'm going to say, but also, inshallah, give you some things to look out for in your journeys to living more intentionally in this dunya while using the law of attraction and moving closer to Allah, inshallah. So this topic, I have to just kind of say straight off the bat, is that it's, of course, every situation is different. So, usually I wouldn't say to people, this sounds like a fake destiny, or, this is not the right purpose for you, or whatever, because it's not for me to say. So, of course, I won't be able to say that to you in this episode either. Take everything that I say and place your own experience, knowledge, intuition, conversations with Allah, all of these things into the situation. But I'm hoping that I can give you some pointers to work off of in order for you to be able to discern whether or not you're going in the right direction, or maybe you need to pivot. Okay. Excuse me, I just needed to burp. It is what it is. Okay. So counterfeit destinies and fake purposes. Y'all have been asking me about these things since the dawn of Manifesting Muslimah. There's at least a couple of comments or DMs every single week of some of you asking me, how do I know if I'm going in the right direction? How do I know if this is the right person? What if I shouldn't be leaving? What if I should stay here? What if I'm not meant to do that? What if that's not my destiny? What if this is not my purpose? And I understand the concern. I honestly do, because as humans, we are very concerned about time, which I am too. So it's not a bad thing necessarily. Well, not just because I'm also concerned about it. That made it sound like, oh, you're concerned about it? Don't worry, I am too. So now it's not a bad thing. That's not what I meant. I just meant I get it. We're all doing it. So it's not a problem as per se. It's just that sometimes we can get caught up in our own timeline of when things are supposed to happen. And so in this getting caught up in the timeline of this dunya, sometimes we think if we can forego the lessons, we'll get to the blessings much quicker. And that means if we look backwards in our lives a little bit here, darling, as you're listening to this, think back for a minute on things in your life in the past where you've thought to yourself, or where you think now to yourself, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I hadn't met that person, or I wish I hadn't spent that money on this project, or whatever it is. And there's something in your life, usually for every single one of us, there will be a handful of things where we think, oh, that was a waste of time. Okay, there's a little bit of a awkward break here. I just had to stop the recording for a second because my oldest dog was just acting really weird in the background, and he was making a lot of noise. He's wearing an Elizabethan collar these days because he had a surgery a couple of weeks ago to operate on a very big hernia, and so he's wearing the collar to stop him from licking his wound or chewing on it or whatever, like dogs do. They're weird, what can I say? And he was just kind of scraping his collar, and I kind of just listened back to the audio, and I just couldn't really deal with that. So sorry for the awkward break there, but or the awkward cut, but let's get back to what I was trying to say. So we can all think back on something in our lives where we think, ugh, I could have done without this. Like, this is not the way that I like it. Could I have done it differently with knowledge that I have now? Then I would have done it differently. Chances are, if you didn't have the knowledge and you went back, you would have done it exactly the same way. And here's the thing, it's because it was meant to happen. That's why it happened that way, because it was meant to happen. And going forward, while we might think to ourselves, oh, I kind of want to forego the lessons and get straight to the blessings, like all the fake purposes and stuff. I just want to forego those. How do I know how can I tell if it's the wrong thing so I can avoid it and just go straight to the real blessing and stuff? Sometimes it's not meant for us to forego them. It's not meant for us to avoid those fake purposes and counterfeit destinies. Sometimes we're meant to pursue them because in them are the lessons that we need to learn. And while we might think back on the things in our lives and think, oh, I could have done without it, chances are, no, you probably couldn't. And while you might not have learned the lesson or picked up on the lesson from that thing just yet, it will come. There's definitely a lesson in the thing because Allah allowed it to happen. He willed it to happen. And if it wasn't meant for you, if it wasn't meant for your purpose, for your growth, for your closeness to Allah, it wouldn't have happened. And while you might sit back and think, I don't know what the point of that was, don't worry, sis. Not everything gets an answer to the thing immediately after. Sometimes we wait years, sometimes it takes years before we fully understand and can appreciate the lesson. While we might not have enjoyed it at the time, we can look back and think, but if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have learned or known what I know now. And that is the difference, right? And so going forward, while I can appreciate that we don't want to waste our times going in the wrong direction, if we can get to the right place quicker, if we just kind of focus on the right thing, there is definitely something to be said about sometimes, if it is the will of Allah, then we will meet those fake purposes and counterfeit destinies. It just has to happen. And while we can sit here and we can think, oh, but I really don't want to. I just really want to meet the right guy, or I just want to start the right business, or I just want to buy the right house, or I just want to move to the country where I feel most at home, or whatever it might be that you're sort of like, I just want to get to the point already. Like, I'm done chasing. I'm done trying to attract. I'm done trying, because we get tired. We're only human, right? And we do get tired. It's unavoidable, I'm afraid. And especially if we're looking at it as something that is going to waste our time. If our perspective going into it is, this is a waste of time and something bad is going to happen. So our perspective to the whole experience is also going to change the things. I'm going to share a little life lesson that I've learned along the way over, I want to say, almost 20 years. In 1.5 years, it'll be 20 years. So I'm going to say 20 years since I was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 19. And then I was like, I got through the whole thing of chemo, radiation. It was a long year that year. And it also somehow went by really, really quick, as everything does in hindsight, right? But coming out of that experience, I really was like, wow, life is meant to be lived. Like, we don't know, any moment we could just pass over. We could just die. Is it called pass over? Pass over. That doesn't sound right to me. But you know what I mean, die. That's what I meant. And it really was such an epiphany for me to sort of like be like, yeah, we're just going to try some things. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And through the last roughly 20 years at this point, I've been able to change my perspective of the chapters of my life. Number one, I see it as chapters, which helps because a chapter can be long, but it could also be short. And so if something is wrong, I can also end the chapter. If it doesn't feel right, I can say, okay, the end on this chapter, move on to the next, right? Secondly, if it feels good and whatever, I can prolong the chapter. I can maybe make a second chapter on the same thing, just with a slightly different narrative or whatever, but it's the same chapter that is ongoing. I can write a whole book full of chapters on this specific topic, whatever that might be, which I'm, for instance, hoping Manifesting Muslim will be a multiple chapter, inshallah, book of beautiful lessons and blessings and just whatever it is that I need to get out of it and what all of you need to get out of it. But I really learned to look at it as such. It's chapters. It doesn't have to be the rest of my life. And I can at any moment pick up and choose to do something differently. And this was very important for me because at 19 years old, number one, I didn't fully understand my mortality, and facing my mortality was one thing, but understanding sort of like the direction in my life. And at 19, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, honestly, I really didn't, and I might have had some ideas, but like most of the things that I was thinking about became so irrelevant at that time. And so when people said to me, wow, you really got to make life matter now, like you got a second chance at life, and all the crappy things people say to someone when they think they're about to die and then they don't, it puts some pressure on you to sort of perform. Like, it puts a pressure on you to wake up every day like a Disney princess and sing with the rats and birds of the city, and sometimes it's not that easy. There's a huge trauma you got to deal with. There's other things, family, friends, restarting life again. Like, I took a full year pretty much out of out of everything, not because I wanted to, but because nobody wanted to hire me because I had cancer. I can laugh about it today, but obviously, as I said, it's nearly 20 years ago at this point. I'm 37 today, in case you were wondering. But the point is that I didn't know what direction I wanted to go in, and so I just started shooting arrows out in different direction, being like, at some point I'm going to hit a balloon and it's going to pop. I don't know, I'm just going to try some things, and if it doesn't work, I'll try something different, and if it doesn't work, I'll try something different. And I think that mindset really, really helped me, and has helped me since then, in just taking chances and just taking those risks. Now, there are, of course, limitations to this, or precautions, because, and I learned this the hard way, by, for instance, for a long time, it was just me. So it was easy for me just to take these risks because I had no accountability to anyone. And for some of those years, I also wasn't Muslim, or I hadn't reverted to Islam. So again, I didn't even have the accountability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or I thought, So my mindset was in a different place. But there's, of course, some people who are married. And I discovered this when I got married, a few years ago, and I'm since divorced again, but it was different because I couldn't just take the chances. And it was also, the thing maybe in me, the impulsivity in me of like, oh, if it's not right, we can just get a divorce. And it was a really horrible way of thinking. Well, I didn't think that, but like in the back of my mind, I was always like, oh, we'll figure it out, right? Because I didn't want to get a divorce. That sounds awful the way that I just said it. But in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, if it doesn't work this way that we're doing the thing, then we'll try a different way, and we'll try a different thing, and then we'll try a different way. And if we don't like living in this country, we'll live in a different country. But the problem is that if there are more people in the decision, or more people that it's going to affect, then of course there's going to be more accountability to other people, right? So that's what I learned really quickly, that if it's on your own, it's much easier to do. And if there are other people, it's not so easy just to walk aimlessly around and then just hope something's going to land, right? Because you've got a whole family perhaps with you, a partner, somebody else around you that's depending on you, or that you're depending on, and that of course has to be taken into account. But nonetheless, that mindset of, if it doesn't work, I can try again. I can always, I know that there's a pretty famous quote, or it used to be once upon a time, like, you're not a tree, move, or you're not a tree, you can move, or something like that. I'm probably butchering it, but it did its round in the early noughties, in the early 2010s, I think, like the first early years of Instagram, if I remember. Like, a lot of people were like using that quote, and that's kind of how I remember it. I'm aging myself horribly in this episode. But either way, alhamdulillah for being able to grow older. Alhamdulillah for that. I'm very, very grateful for that. But that whole mentality of like, you're not stagnant. At any moment you can choose differently, and you can do things differently. And those choices and those movements that are different are going to, direct you in a different direction and towards a different purpose. And that brings me a lot of comfort, and I hope it brings you a lot of comfort as well. So either way, even if you're like, oh, I don't know, it has to be it, or like, I don't know if this is my purpose, it's okay. Go towards it. If it isn't, then turn around and go in a different direction. And it is totally safe, and you're guided and supported all the way through. And understand that if something is meant to happen, it will happen, and you cannot outrun it. You can't run faster towards it. You cannot push it off onto somebody else. It is going to happen. So the more time you spend wasting time or energy focusing on whether or not this is the right thing, that is time that you could have figured it out little by little by taking the action, moving towards it. And honestly, this brings me to the next point, which is, how to know whether or not it is for you, right? So how can we then, once we start moving towards something, and we start doing the work and whatever, and we're going in with good faith and knowing we're supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah is guiding us in this dunya, how then do we know when we need to start pivoting, or if we're going in the wrong direction? And again, so this is where I really want to put that disclaimer in that I put in the beginning somewhere about, every situation is different. So please, please, please use your own discernment. look at your unique situation. If you need help, you're obviously welcome to book in a one-on-one session with me or join the group membership, because we talk about these things all the time. And how do you know if it's like a calling towards one thing or if it's your ego calling you towards another thing? So the first thing that I will say is it moving you closer to Allah or further away from Allah? That's the first thing. That is the absolute first thing. Is it going to move you closer to Allah or move you further away from Allah? And that is not just a question about I feel closer to Allah, like I love that you feel closer to Allah, but is it moving you further away from your religious duties, salah, fasting, all of the things that you're supposed to be doing? Is it moving you away from that, or is it moving you closer to that? Does it make you want to do it more? Is it making you a worse person? You might still be praying and everything, but you're finding yourself getting more bitter, more stressed, more anxious. The closer you get to the thing, and the thought of getting the thing isn't necessarily calming that. That could be, another thing like that, that could really impact your deen, because we're supposed to be good people doing good deeds, right? And it's hard if we're constantly walking around being stressed and kind of snapping at everyone around us and being anxious and having doubts and fears and hesitations all the time, and kind of acting off of those energies and emotions rather than love, blessing, peacefulness, supportiveness, submission, surrender, all of these emotions, right? Another thing I would say is look at whether or not everything seems to fall apart all the time as you're moving closer. So this is very, very important to understand, that it's not the same as an obstacle. And I know it can be really difficult to know the differences, but intuitively, when you start really getting to know yourself, you'll know the differences between the two. If, for instance, you get the thing, this is not just a question of when you're moving closer to the thing. This is once you've gotten the thing. So once you've received the manifestation of the thing that you think is your destiny or your purpose, as you're living it, is everything around you turning to shit? Basically, is everything around you turning to shit? You cannot seem to have the blessing and a good life at the same time, or good friends and the deen and good financial abundance and whatever at the same time. It's almost as if there has to be a compromise in some ways. And it's not a good compromise. It's one that makes you feel really bad. Probably as well, again, like giving you a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety for no real reason. Again, so let's say, for instance, a partner. You want to get married, so you move to find a partner, and you meet somebody, and in the beginning you're like, I don't know if this is the right guy, but I'm going to just kind of go with it and see what happens. Okay. So you're going with it, and then you get married. And then once you get married, while it might sort of like on the outside look good, internally, it feels like there's a misalignment. And it might not happen initially. It might kind of come down the line. There's a misalignment. You're not communicating. There's not trust between the two of you. For whatever reason, the finances are never working. And it's it's not because, listen, finances is hard whether you're single or you're married. So it's not just about, we're struggling a little bit financially. It's to the point where you're, it's starting to affect your marriage and your family life, the way that you view each other. You start having a lot of resentment and anger, and you're living in those energies rather than you feel it and then you come out of it again, or you're noticing, I felt a little bit angry with you yesterday, but I'm actually good now. You're pretty much in those energies all the time. Then maybe it's a good time for you to figure out if there's need for change within the marriage, or if it's time for a pivot. And you can look at however you want to look at pivoting at that moment. I would call it a divorce or a separation or something, but I'm not one to tell you to get a divorce or separation, so please don't put those words into my mouth. But use your discernment, look at the things. It's the same thing with a business. At first, if you set up a business, you actually set it up, you're starting to make sales, the money is coming in, but now it's taking all of your time. So you start neglecting your salah. You're also people are taking advantage of you left, right, and center, and it's making you feel really, really bad. They're taking advantage of you financially. So your whole family starts to, basically, I don't want to say steal your money, but you have no boundaries around money. So you just kind of give your money to the point where you feel like you have to work harder to make the money, and it's kind of stressing you out, because instead of having a business so you can have freedom, you have a business only so you can keep feeding that empty void of darkness that keeps stealing your money. And then again, so the purpose is like, oh, that's not the right one, because it's removing me further away from my deen. I'm starting to resent the people around me. I feel like I never have enough, even though I have more than I've ever had in my life. So do you see what I mean when I'm trying to give these examples? Again, it's so difficult sometimes to explain, especially how it goes, but it's so intuitively felt. It is very much felt. And it's not a feeling like, oh, it comes and go. It is a constant. It is a constant energy, and it stays there. And so in these cases, sometimes, and this is the good thing, sometimes it's not about we have to let it go completely. Again, this is why I say, pivot doesn't necessarily mean divorce or separation. Oh, goodness. 1 second, ladies. Well, what can I say? It really is the dog's episode today. They really want to speak on this subject as well, apparently. So getting back on to what I was saying, sometimes, pivoting or changing some things, it doesn't necessarily mean giving up on it entirely. Sometimes it just means adjusting something, and then it becomes right. So your intuition or the dream itself, when you were intuitively felt like this is the way that I need to go, could have been very correct. So you're going in the right direction, but then along the way, you're missing some cues, or you're letting your ego lead, or social pressures or family pressures or whatever. And that's when you start sort of like diverting into something that's more of an obscure or fake version of the real purpose. And that's where we end up in these scenarios that ends up being more of the lesson than the blessing, where we feel these like, oh, this isn't the way that I wanted it to feel, and this isn't the way that I thought it would feel once I got the blessing. And so in order for you then to change it back into the blessing and go into the real purpose, sometimes it means making small adjustments. Maybe it's around boundary setting, maybe it's around communication, maybe it's around financial budgeting, literacy, maybe it's about setting, are you good there, Habibti? What is it? What are you saving me towards? Is it a mosquito outside? She's so protective of me, but sometimes it's a little annoying. No, don't say that. Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. I feel instantly guilty. Anyway, let me stop talking about that. So making small adjustments, and then it'll kind of course correct, and it'll direct you back into the real purpose. Or you can get stubborn with it and move further into the fake purpose. But the fake purpose is not going to make you happy. It's actually just going to make you feel worse, maybe feel resentful, angry, more stressed, more anxiety, more fear. And maybe to the point, I wouldn't even say maybe, most definitely at some point or another, make your relationship with Allah become more vulnerable. And that's obviously the worst thing that could happen when we're following a fake purpose or a counterfeit destiny, is that, it pushes us into a direction where we start questioning whether or not Allah even loves us. So that's why, of course, we need to be aware so that we can course correct before that happens. And it's so important to understand that you have the power to do that. But it does require, the willingness to want to change it. And sometimes the changes can be the things that we don't want to do, the hard work. Now, listen, I was married for, a hiccup. And during that hiccup, I felt the stresses of marriage. It is difficult sometimes to find the communication, especially if you feel like you're right. You feel like, no, but I'm right and you're wrong. And so why do I have to be the big person and sit down and find, a balance or whatever and have communication? It's hard. And it can be really uncomfortable sometimes to have certain conversations, but it's important and it's necessary if you want to make the pivot into something that is more healthy and helpful in the future. Now, of course, don't take marriage advice from me. I'm divorced, so I'm not the one, sis. I'm not the one. And I'm at this point still currently debating whether or not I do want to get married again, but that's a whole other conversation for another podcast. Maybe not even this one, but somebody else's. But the point is that the changes that sometimes is necessary to make for the purpose to become the real one again might be really uncomfortable for us in that moment. And it can be something that we don't really want to do. If it's a business, financial abundance, and you get the abundance, and in order for you to make the purpose the real purpose again, and direct it back onto what feels good again, you might have to set some really uncomfortable financial boundaries with your family or your friends. You might have to set some real financial boundaries with yourself. That can be quite uncomfortable. You might have to learn some things about finances and how they work in this world before you start making that kind of money, or before you can have a healthy relationship with the money, in order for you to have that real purpose where the money is just another tool rather than the whole full purpose. There's so many things that could be going wrong, but and that could be holding you back from making the little adjustment in order for the fake purpose to be a real purpose again. But ultimately, what I want you to be conscious of is that whether or not you're chasing the real or the fake purpose, I want you to know that you are very much in control of a lot of it. Because even if, let's say, you're chasing the fake purpose, if it happens to be, then it is by Allah's will. Meaning you have to go through that in order for you to get to the blessing on the other side of that. Yes, I know that's a sucky thing to hear. I know. You don't have to shout at me or humph at me at that, but it's the truth. So sometimes, even if you're going through what you perceive to be the right thing, but your word is the fake thing, and, in the future you might be able to look back and be like, oh, that wasn't really the right thing. You kind of still have to move through that. Sometimes if Allah has it in for you to, there's a real big lesson there for you, you have to go here first, and then I will give you the blessing. Then is it really that fake? Is it really a counterfeit destiny? Or is it just a part of your purpose? Is it just part of your destiny? Is it just part of that qadr that you're meant to be living through? I would argue that there really is no such thing as fake or counterfeit destinies or purposes, for that matter. I know I've just done a whole podcast episode on it, but humor me here, okay? Because everything that is meant to happen will happen. So it can't be fake and it can't be counterfeit. The only thing about it for us, and this is, I understand this is like on a spiritual level and all that stuff, so it can get a little woo-woo at times, but if it is not meant for us, it will never find us. So a part of our purpose or a part of our destiny can be this thing that we thought was the real thing, and then we realize, oh, no, I diverted somewhere along the line. This doesn't feel real to me. This doesn't feel like my real purpose. And then divert and move further on to the next thing. That doesn't make it a fake thing, though. I mean, we're going to use those words in this podcast to describe it, because that's like how we're going to know, if we're moving in the right direction or the wrong direction and all the good things. But ultimately, and I really hope that this gives you some type of comfort, even if the thing you're chasing is not your forever thing, it is meant to be there for you. It is meant to be a part of your journey. It is meant to be a part of that qadr that you're currently living. And that is the important part. If Allah doesn't want it to come your way, it will never come your way. It'll never happen. But if Allah wants it to be a part of your destiny, a part of your life, a part of the lessons for you in this dunya, then there is nothing you can do to forego it. Absolutely nothing. But, and I want to be very clear on this, we have, to an extent, a power or a say in how long we stay stuck in something that is not meant for us. How long we keep ourselves in these fake or counterfeit destinies and purposes. By us choosing to not learn the lesson, not pick up the cue when Allah is putting it down for us, not making the changes and choosing something different, we can prolong the lessons. When we go towards something and Allah said, like, I see where you're going, you're getting a little misdirected here, so I'm going to give you a red flag. And you see the red flag and you recognize the red flag and you're like, oh, that reminds me of something that happened in the past, but I'm going to ignore it. then, that's on you. That's on you. So sometimes you can prolong these things by ignoring things. You can prolong these things by not choosing to change the things, by not choosing to let Allah guide you, by leaning more on yourself than Allah in the journey. And by leaning more on yourself, I mean your ego. This is how I feel today, so I'm just going to ride with how I feel, rather than I believe in a grander purpose, and so it doesn't matter how I feel. I've got the motivation that Allah has inspired me with something, and that's why I'm going to do it even when I feel tired, or I'm not going to do it even though I feel really, really tempted, or whatever it might be. And so we can, prolong those periods of times in our lives where we get stuck in something that isn't meant for us because we are too scared to take the next step, or we're too proud to admit we made a mistake and choose something different and say, whoops, I'm just going to redirect myself here. And so that's where it really becomes important for you to understand when you're in that position and to start taking action to change it. And as you're moving towards it, again, while you're making a decision, this is where we start talking about the quantum physics of it all and free will. You can make a decision. Allah says, okay, that's the qadar you're choosing. We're going to go with that because it's one of the qadars that is available to you. And while Allah is trying to guide you towards something, you can at any moment choose differently, right? You could at any moment say, nah, these people are tempting me over there now. And so you can choose differently. And so Allah might be like, well, if you choose that direction, there's a lesson. If you stayed true to the path that I'd inspired you with, then it would have been a beautiful thing. But okay, fine, go through the lesson and then meet me again if you're ready at the blessing. When you're ready to come out, I'll guide you back over to that blessing again. But it really requires us not to let our ego or other people come in and meddle too much with the inspiration and the intuition that Allah is giving us when He is guiding us on our path. And the moment we can really learn to let Allah take the reins and steer us, and that we're basically just like, okay, like I'm just going to go this way, I'm just going to go this way, and constantly keeping this open mind and knowing that at any moment you can choose differently and do differently, it becomes that much more fun to live this life. It becomes so much more exciting because you see it as more opportunities rather than limiting yourself. Because if something has to be the right thing the first time around, that's very limiting. It's extremely limiting, because if it's not the right thing, then you're stuck. That's it. You're done. Then what? Nothing else, because that's the only thing that was the possibility for you. But if you look at it as like, oh, that could be the possibility for me now. Well, what if that's not the right thing? Well, I don't know. Then Allah will show me something different. Khalas, leave it at that. And while Allah might not have shown you what the other thing might be, if this thing didn't work out, then that's okay too. It'll come in time, in Allah's divine timing. Stop worrying so much about these things is what I'm trying to say essentially. Stop worrying so much about these things. You will know it. Worry more about getting to know yourself, working on yourself and your relationship with Allah. And the more you reflect upon yourself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, now I can't remember which surah it is, because that's how I roll, son, is, do they not reflect upon themselves? Do they not reflect upon themselves? Get to know yourself, understand yourself, and create the connection with Allah. And when those two things are starting to work work better, they start working really well in harmony with each other, where it's easier for you to stop holding on to the reins so tightly and start releasing it and having more fun with it. And understanding, as I said again, it's not about the limitations, it's about the opportunities. Even if that's not the right thing, there are still an endless amount of opportunities out there. And it will bring you to the same result, or a result that's even better. And that's what you need to hold on to. All right, my darling. I know that this one was a little bit different. It was I was all over the place for a couple of times there. The dogs kind of wanted to get in on the conversation and stuff. But I really hope nonetheless, that you took something valuable from this episode that gives you a sense of calm and sense of ease when you are making decisions in this dunya. Know and trust and believe that Allah has these things under control, and if it is not meant to come to you, it will never, no matter how many angels or jinns or people are trying to push it your way, it'll never touch a hair on your head. And if it is meant for you, nothing, no force in the universe outside of Allah is able to push it away from you. And so walk into this dunya and walk into this dunya with a sense of wonderment of the amount of blessings that Allah has put in front of you and the opportunities that He has put in front of you, and the fact that He has given you the ultimate power of being able to decide by having free will and be able to change your circumstances because you have free will. Subhanallah, I find so much comfort in that, and I do hope that you find a lot of comfort in that as well. I would love, as always, to hear your thoughts on this. Anything that came up for you, any concerns, any aha moments, what came up for you, what spoke to you, what was the thing that I said or didn't say that was like, oh, the thing you said made me think of something else, and that really like had an impact, and so here I am, and I'm going to try it anyway, and I'm going to go in faith and tawakkul and try this thing and go for it. You know, what rang true for you, what didn't, what do you have trouble with? Like, I want to hear from you. I love when you send me DMs and write me little comments and in the Spotify app and comments on my posts on Instagram and stuff. I absolutely love hearing from you. So please don't hold back. Please continue to do that. It absolutely makes my day every single time I receive one of those. So I'm going to leave it here. You know where to catch me at Manifesting Muslimah absolutely everywhere. And I'm going to leave it here for now. And inshallah, I will see you in my next episode. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.